A few moments to return to the developing news from the Middle East. Hezbollah rejecting a ceasefire proposal between Israel and Lebanon. The agreement had centred around the Iran-backed group ending its attacks. Joining us now, our military analyst Sean Bell. And Sean, where are we at now? Because two sides of kind of a three-sided situation, I'm not going to say agreement, but three-sided situation agreed. The third parties then said no. Is it all in tatters now?
Yeah, I mean, try and make sense of that if we can. I mean, it is day 97, so end of week 14 now of President Trump's 4 to 6 week war in Iran. There's so much noise around all this stuff. We dart from little sound bites like this. But if you remember the ceasefires, which the central, they traditionally were put in place to allow bodies to be cleared off the battlefield and talks to continue. There's two ceasefires in place at the moment. There's no real evidence that both sides, both America and Iran, are trading blows. You've got Hezbollah and Israelis trading blows. Doesn't feel like we're anywhere close to any sort of deal. And President Trump was asked, well, what do you mean by a ceasefire? And he said, well, as long as we are shooting but in a moderate manner, is how he described it, which, as a military guy, I find really difficult to understand. It's like being a little bit pregnant. It's just you're either in a ceasefire or you're not. The claims are also that a deal is imminent at the moment, well, it's potentially as early as the weekend. It's not the first time that President Trump has claimed that. I think what is interested is Iran actually talking at the moment? They had said we're not going to talk because of the fighting that's going on in Lebanon. Is this ceasefire actually going to make a significant difference to progress of the talks? We'll have to see. Israel
occupied parts of southern Lebanon, 1982 to 2000. In 1985, Hezbollah published its manifesto, and the exact wording I'm not going to remember off the top of my head, but it calls for the destruction of the state of Israel. You know, paraphrase, but that's effectively what it calls for. How can there be any credibility in a ceasefire when one of the central parties not to the ceasefire but to the situation flatly wants completely the opposite?
Well, that's an excellent point. If you go back to the start of the war, the Iran war, America and Israel were lockstep because the focus was on stopping Iran getting a nuclear weapon, which would be an existential threat to Israel. Where we sit today is that America is dealing with Iran, and it's very clear that Prime Minister Netanyahu is trying to deal with Hezbollah for exactly the reasons you talk about. This is not the first time a ceasefire has been put in place, even in the last couple of months. It was the 16th of April, the first ceasefire was put in place between Lebanon and Israel. A couple of weeks later, that was extended. Then it was extended again. The most recently, 15th of May, it was extended by another 45 days. But it was nothing more than a signature on a bit of paper. The war was still breaking out very widely. And I think what we've heard so far is that Iran had stopped negotiations with America because they said, we can't negotiate while Israel's doing this war. Trump spoke very angrily to Netanyahu. Netanyahu then agreed to this latest ceasefire. But, of course, as you say, it wasn't with Hezbollah. Hezbollah's come out this morning and said, we do not agree with this. The only way we will sign to a ceasefire is if Israel leaves all of southern Lebanon, which is about 20% of southern Lebanon has been taken. And interestingly, even on the other side, the Israelis, the hardliners there, have said, well, they don't want a ceasefire. And they've said, but any of the smallest transgressions will be punished very harshly. So it feels incredibly fragile. The one positive I would take from this, if President Trump is correct, if the peace talks with Iran are closing in on a deal, then any conversation like this might just provide a very small window of opportunity to get those talks over the line.
That position from Hezbollah also echoed in some reporting from Reuters, citing Iranian state media, saying that a Quds Force commander says that the minimum demand in Lebanon is for Israel to return to pre-war lines, so effectively south of the border, you know, and testament there to the fact that Tehran and the Hezbollah leadership are in lockstep with each other. Or maybe Hezbollah follows the steps of Tehran, perhaps is a more accurate way of describing it. We focus a lot on this at the moment, but if we were to zoom out and look at the wider situation in the Middle East, we've got to talk about, surely, the Strait of Hormuz. What's the deal there? Because it feels as though there was so much attention at the beginning of the war in March through April, and as we progress through May, whether we've accepted the status quo or not, it feels as though there's a bit of a status quo of, well, the Strait of Hormuz is closed.
Yeah, I think let's do your zooming out. If we go back 28th of February, when America started the war with Iran, you got the world superpower going in. President Trump would have expected, he said it was a 4 to 6 week operation. He regularly said, I think day 2, he said, we've won. He regularly expected Iran to be subjugated, to surrender, wave the white flag, and they regularly said they've got no cards in negotiation. But that military strength has not translated into strategic success on the ground. Now we find ourselves in a position at the moment where every time the US takes action against Iranian targets around the Strait of Hormuz or whatever, Iran immediately responds, not necessarily America, but actually against the Middle East. Why are they doing that? Because the Middle East want to bring this to an end. What Iran has very effectively done, from going from being a pariah state, now it has isolated America, because it, the rest of the Middle East, and indeed the rest of the world, needs to see the Strait of Hormuz opened. That wasn't the agenda at the start of the war. What's happened to the nuclear conversation? All of that is interesting to see how these talks play out. It does feel like the Strait will get open, but whether the nuclear debate gets solved or not, or gets kicked into the long grass, we'll have to wait and see.
Sean, appreciate it. Thank you so much.